While every fighting game provides a unique experience, they all tend to follow the same set of rules. Or at least they should, since breaking these rules is sure to cause an uproar within the fighting game community. And nothing's worse than upsetting your own fan base just because you wanted to save some money. Still, gaming companies continue to break these unspoken rules, so I think it's time to set the record straight. I'd like to share my 7 golden rules to never break in a fighting game. These are in no particular order, as I feel they're all very important. Alright, let's get to it. Number 1. Have an arcade mode. This is mostly about Street Fighter V. Sure, they'll be adding arcade editions soon, and this free update will offer a ton of arcade modes and endings. However, many would argue there should have been a base arcade mode from the start, and I definitely agree with that sentiment. Furthermore, I think every arcade mode needs to have cinematic endings for each character. It's honestly crazy that I even have to mention this, since it used to be expected for every arcade mode to do this. Then Soul Calibur 5 happened. I remember that awkward silence very vividly. I was playing Ezio and wanted to finish arcade mode so I could see what his relevance was in the story. I wanted to see what interesting ways the developers managed to weave him into the universe. Bless my little heart, I expected so much back then. Anyway, I beat the entire arcade mode, and then I just sat there, staring at a high score screen. No ending cinematic, not even a few art panels with some dialogue attached. Nope, just a high score. My soul was physically hurt that day. And I wasn't the only one who felt betrayed. Basically every fan was upset about this. The developers likely thought that a full story mode was sufficient. No, it wasn't, especially when half the cast isn't even in that story mode. What happened to my boy Yoshimitsu? How about Cervantes, Mitsurugi, Hilda, Aeon, Raphael? What about their story? I guess the reason I take this so seriously is that it could mark the start of an awful trend in fighting games. Imagine if this becomes standard practice, releasing your game without an arcade mode and just adding it later on in a future update. No, I will not let that happen. I refuse to stay silent on this matter. I will not go quietly into the night. At this very moment, I'm drawing a line in the sand. Every fighting game from now on must come with an arcade mode or risk ridicule and disdain from its fans. Furthermore, this arcade mode must include a cinematic ending for every character, even if it is just artwork and some audio on top. Injustice 2 actually did that, and it's still awesome, though I do prefer CGI. Just putting that out there. Number 2. At least 2 costumes for every character. I'm looking at you, King of Fighters 14. No, I don't care how many colors you give me. I want different costumes, especially when your game looks like it belongs on the Xbox 360. You can't deny how easy it would be to add new costumes for these low poly characters. Hey now, don't laugh, Marvel Infinite. Don't you laugh back there, I see you. You may have added a new costume for each character, but you expect me to pay for it? Why? Just because you made them post-release? Nah fam, that should have been done a long time ago. Step your game up. It's not my fault you decided to wait. I'm not paying extra for something that other fighting games do for free. Shoutouts to you, NetherRealm and Namco Bandai. You did good. Well, at least now you did. I'm not forgetting about that. Number 3. Keep your legacy characters close, and your fan favorites even closer. This golden rule is often overlooked by many developers, and it nearly kills their franchise in the process. Third Strike might be a beloved game now, but back in the day it upset a lot of players. Where's Blanca, they shouted. Where's Dhalsim? Wait, is this weirdo supposed to replace Blanca and Dhalsim? Hold up, this emo kid is replacing Guile? What the f***? Where's Sagat? Where's Bison? Cammy, where are you? Seriously, believe it or not, this game nearly killed the Street Fighter franchise. While the new fighters were interesting, players missed the iconic characters from older games. Many of the playstyles were still there, but it didn't matter. Fans wanted the classic characters back, not just their functions. Functions. A few years later, Soul Calibur 5 made the exact same mistake. They replaced over half the cast with new characters. Just like Third Strike, these new fighters kept the playstyle of legacy characters, but the fans didn't care. Many of them dropped the game altogether because their favorite characters were gone. Even a recent game like Street Fighter V made this same mistake in Season 2. Nearly everybody was expecting fan favorites like Sagat or Sakura to return, but they never came. Instead, Capcom chose to release 6 brand new fighters, and this disappointed a ton of fans. Many even claimed to stop playing the game because of it, vowing only to return for Season 3. Now, if any developers are listening, please heed this warning. Never value new characters over fan favorites, and always include the most popular legacy characters in each game. Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Number 4. Great online gameplay. This might go without saying, but that doesn't mean it's not a golden rule. It doesn't matter how amazing your game is if the online sucks. Just ask NetherRealm. They had a really tough time getting it right. But Injustice 2 finally nailed it. The online in that game was nearly perfect at release, but that was only due to all the suffering that MKX had to endure. That game was almost unplayable at times, and even at its best, it still had input delay. You learned to cope with it, sure, but it still hurt the game in a big way. Thankfully, MKX boasted a ton of offline modes, but the online experience still left a huge scar on an otherwise beautiful game. But this rule goes much further than just lag. It also extends to online rules and punishments. If a player straight up rage quits, then they deserve to be punished for it, and this punishment varies from game to game. Some games suspend the player, while others simply lower your online rank. Other games like Killer Instinct actually force rage quitters to play against other rage quitters, thus leaving the honest players to play amongst themselves. I believe that punishing cheaters and rage quitters is essential for an optimal online experience. Street Fighter V actually had a big problem with this. Players could rage quit without any consequences whatsoever, and since losing a match lowered your rank, this offered dishonest players an easy way out. They could always just rage quit if they were about to lose. Not only would they suffer zero consequences, but their opponent didn't get to win either. In some cases, their opponent would actually lose points. This caused many players to avoid ranked matches altogether, choosing instead to play lobby matches. I believe that every fighting game should have built-in systems that actively punish cheaters and rage quitters. And don't wait to implement this during an update. Have it there on release, and while you're at it, reward the player who stayed. Treat it like a regular win. I believe that honest players should never have to live in fear of a rage quitter. Instead, they should be allowed to relish in such a victory, having made their opponents so salty that they cut and run like cowards. It really is a good feeling. Number 5. Extra offline modes and unlockables. Arcade mode is a good start, but it's important to have extra content available offline, especially since developers like NetherRealm keep raising the bar. Both MKX and Injustice 2 have offline challenges that change daily, not to mention a ton of unlockable content. Street Fighter V also does a good job at this with weekly missions, challenge trials, and separate story modes for each character. All of these modes earn fight money, an in-game currency which players can use to unlock stages, costumes, and colors. Unfortunately, you have to pay real money for most costumes. It's a good start, but many players are understandably still upset. Marvel Infinite is likely lacking the most in terms of offline content and unlockables. There's a story mode and some character trials, but that's about it. There's no interesting unlockables or any character endings for arcade mode. So unless you love online play, this game has very little to offer you. And it shows. Even though it came out fairly recently, less people are playing it than most other fighting games. In order to keep players motivated, you need interesting unlockables, and to keep players engaged, you need plenty of fun modes offline. Number 6. Keep the DLC even for each character. One thing I loved about Street Fighter IV is that every costume had a theme. As a result, every character got a costume for that theme. This meant that every fighter had the same number of costumes, or at least it was close. This also seems to be the case for Marvel Infinite. While I am still salty the costumes weren't there at launch, I'm happy to see how each character has the same number of costumes so far. Sadly, Street Fighter V has broken away from this trend. Certain characters have tons of DLC costumes, while others barely have any. For example, Chun-Li has over 14 costumes right now. Contrast that with Fang, who has 4. That's a huge difference. This costume preference is likely due to popularity. Capcom knows that Chun-Li is popular, and therefore many players will buy her costumes. Compare that with Fang, who is barely played at all, and likely doesn't sell many costumes as a result. Not to mention the obvious sexual incentives for purchasing these costumes. Sex obviously sells, especially when a majority of your fan base is male. I actually made a poster about this, and it feels more relevant than ever. Anyway, the point is that every character deserves an equal number of costumes, or at least close to even. I'm okay with a few characters having 2 or more costumes than the others, but 10 more? No, that's a huge injustice. Speaking of injustice, they were actually much worse about this. The first game gave nearly every costume to Batman and Superman. I'm just saying, it's not always Capcom. Number 7. Have a solid story mode. While this may seem obvious now, it wasn't that long ago that story modes were considered unnecessary. Many also feared that story modes would lead to less content elsewhere, often citing Soul Calibur 5 as an example. MK9 helped to alleviate that phobia. Not only was the story mode fun and engaging, but it was also very long to boot. Plus, the game offered a ton of offline modes and unlockables. Injustice kept this trend going, and story mode became a huge selling point in fighting games. And Capcom has since followed suit, adding full story modes to Street Fighter V and Marvel Infinite. Like it or not, story modes are here to stay. Personally, I'll always support a story mode if it's fully realized, since it gives characters a reason to fight, while also creating a more immersive experience. I love watching Morgan try to seduce Ghost Rider, or witnessing Harley Quinn struggle to escape her past. In summary, story mode can be a great way to add depth to your characters and further immerse the player in your game. As long as it's done right, it will always benefit the game in a big way. Alright everyone, that concludes my 7 golden rules for fighting games. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like down below. And while you're down there, go ahead and post a comment too. What are some of your golden rules for fighting games? If you want to watch more videos like this one, please subscribe and hit the bell. That will notify you when I make a new video, and you don't want to miss them because they're always fun. If anyone is interested, I also sell t-shirts. Every purchase helps support the channel and you look good while doing it. If you want to support the channel more directly, then of course there's always Patreon. Make sure to come back next time, and as always, stay underdogs.